just got out of theaters from seeing The Weeknd's brand new movie, Hurry Up Tomorrow, on the big screen, and I have some things that I want to discuss for this movie, guys, because it is highly controversial right now. The audience and the critics seem to be split down the middle on this film. And me being a Weeknd fan myself, I wanted to give my honest take, my honest review on this movie. So with that being said, guys, we're going to break this film down. We're going to get into this movie review. Let's go. Hurry Up Tomorrow is a new suspense thriller directed by Trey Shults that stars The Weeknd as himself, Abel Tesfaye, and of course the title of this film comes from The Weeknd's most recent album by the same name, Hurry Up Tomorrow. And inside of this film we see an insomniac musician encounters a mysterious stranger, leading to a journey that challenges everything he knows about himself. Now, who is that mysterious stranger inside of this film? Well, it's none other than one of my favorite actresses in Hollywood at this current moment, Jenna Ortega, which we'll touch on her more later on inside this video. And then we also have Barry Keoghan inside of here playing The Weeknd's manager. Now, like I said, I want to completely break this film down for you guys while for the most part remaining a non-spoiler review video. So with that being said, let's get into my positives for Hurry Up Tomorrow. And for my first positive with this film, I want to talk about the concept, because the concept of this film I think is brilliant. I love that Abel is playing himself inside of this film, which we'll talk about his performance more later on, but the fact that he gets to play himself, he gets to play The Weeknd, he gets to play Abel Tesfaye, this big star musician on top of the world who is experiencing some heartbreak in his life, and during this moment of weakness, he encounters a psychotic fan by the name of Anima, who is played by Jenna Ortega inside of this film, and these two end up hitting it off, end up bonding, and for a moment in time, The Weeknd is able to forget who he is. He's able to forget that he's this big star and just experience a level of normality, which I'm sure he doesn't get to experience very often. Now, with that being the concept, I can see why when this movie was pitched, they definitely wanted to go ahead and make it, because on paper, this sounds like a brilliant idea where if executed properly, this can be an amazing film. Now, was it executed properly? Well, we'll discuss that later on in this video. Before my first positive, I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted the concept. Now, let's move into my next positive with this movie, and that would have to be the score, aka the soundtrack. Now, the soundtrack for this film is actually the Hurry Up Tomorrow album, which is of course why they have the exact same title for the film and the album. Now, the album itself is a beautiful piece of work from The Weeknd. I believe he said that this is going to be the last album that he releases under the moniker The Weeknd, and it seems like he's really making an effort, really making a push to transition over into the world of acting, over into the world of movies, as we've seen with his HBO Max series, The Idol, which I did completely cover on my channel. You can go watch my reactions and reviews for that. Now, back to speaking on the soundtrack. Beautiful music, excellent performances, amazing vocals throughout this entire soundtrack from Abel Tesfaye. Not only that, but during a certain sequence inside of this movie, he gets a chance to just showcase his vocals with no backtrack, nothing playing, just The Weeknd singing, and man, is this guy a next level talent when it comes to making music and when it comes to his vocal performance. Now, a specific song on this album is actually tied into the overall plot for this movie, and they really hone in on it, and it's a beautiful track. So I love that the movie went there. If you're a fan of The Weeknd, you're definitely going to get something out of this movie, because you get to hear all of these great tracks, all of these bangers from his catalog be played in the theater on that theater surround sound, and it sounds amazing, especially considering they don't just touch on the Hurry Up Tomorrow album, they also go back and play some of his other classics. So as a Weeknd fan myself, that was amazing to get to see on the big screen. Now that we've had a chance to discuss the score and the soundtrack of this movie, I want to touch on another positive I had with this film, and that is the visuals, because this movie looks beautiful from start to finish. The directing was on another level here from Trey Shults. He did a fantastic job when it came to a sense of visuals, when it came to cinematography, some of the scenes you get to witness here, some of the imagery here. It's extremely artistic, which can be pointed out as a positive for this film overall, is the artistic vision here on display. The camera work was masterful, and to be honest, I'm surprised that this had a major theatrical release, because typically a film like this you would see at more of an indie theater where an independent film would be playing, because that's the vibe in the sense that I got from this movie, was that this is an artist's vision on display that you're getting to see here when you watch this take place. And yeah, this movie's visuals were excellent. Now, with that being said, let's move into my next positive with this film, and that would have to be Abel Tesfaye himself, The Weeknd. It's finally time to talk about The Weeknd inside of this film, to talk about his performance. How did Abel do inside of this film? Well, to be honest with you, I'm going to give a different take than you're seeing online. I'm going to give a different take than what you're seeing most people say right now. For instance, there's a clip going viral right now on TikTok, on X, on all these other social media platforms of a particular scene where Abel explodes on Jenna Ortega's character. Now, out of context, I could see why that scene looks goofy if you just cut it and then post that somewhere else. But with the full context of this film, I thought this was actually a solid performance from The Weeknd, because unlike in The Idol, where we got all of these great memes and he's kind of playing this ridiculous character, inside of this film, he's getting to play himself, okay? He's playing Abel Tesfaye, which no one knows how to do that better than Abel himself. So his performance in this film came across as believable. It came across as authentic. It felt like he was pulling from a real place here, especially when he had to touch on his emotional side, which he has to a ton of times throughout this movie. Really, this entire plot is centered around Abel's emotions, the place that he is in his life and in his career and in his romantic life with a past lover who he can't get any contact with inside of this film, and it's driving him mad. It's driving him insane, which are themes that we got throughout Abel's entire musical career. So to see him pull on that for more of an acting job here, I thought it was wonderfully done. Okay, you see him go crazy inside of this movie. He's on the drugs, he's on the alcohol, everything that if you're a real listener of The Weeknd, he talks about inside of his music. You get to see him portray that inside of this film and really lose control and lose himself inside of this movie. And I thought that that was extremely entertaining to see. It felt like after seeing his last performance inside of The Idol that he really took a step up here in terms of his acting capability, which I have nothing but applause for as a fan of this guy. And I loved getting to see him on the big screen, loved getting to see Abel in the theater. It felt very surreal as someone who's listened to his music for a very long time, and as someone who's been to a Weeknd concert very recently within the past 3 years for his latest tour. Now, to continue speaking on that point and touching on his concerts, by the way, you get to see The Weeknd perform in concert inside of this film, which I thought was a really cool scene here. You get about 1 to 2 different concert sequences here where it's his actual set, it's his actual stage that he uses for his tour. So to see that inside of this film, again, as a Weeknd fan, it's a nice little treat there that I appreciated. Now, with that being said, those are my positives for this film pretty much wrapped up. Now it's time that we move into the controversial side. It's time that we move into my negatives for the Hurry Up Tomorrow movie. And for my first negative with this film, we're going to talk about Jenna Ortega. Now, like I said, this is one of my top 5 actresses in Hollywood working today. I think she's a phenomenal talent. I think she's amazing in every piece of work I've seen her in until this movie, guys. I feel like as a fan of Jenna Ortega that I know her pretty well in terms of her acting capability, and I gotta say, it's really up there until we get to this movie. I don't know what happened with this film, but it really feels like, I don't know, that they didn't give her enough to work with here. It feels like she's kind of phoning in this performance. I don't believe her when she's supposed to come across as this psychotic fan of The Weeknd who is head over heels and in love with him and truly at heart knows this guy's music. I don't believe it at all when I watched this performance. It came across as just not believable, especially when, of course, they are going to meet at some point inside of this film. Especially when they meet inside of this film, there's no level of excitement there whatsoever. It's hard to believe, which, by the way, people have been trying to say that one of Abel's scenes and sequences inside of this movie was on the cringe side. No. One of Jenna Ortega's scenes inside of this film was the most cringe part of this entire movie. And you're going to know exactly what scene that is if you go out to see this film. I'm not going to spoil it for you, okay? Now, like I said, this is someone who is a generational talent, and I think that we should have got a lot more out of her inside of this film, especially considering, guys, this is a major theatrical release. This is released in all theaters. Jenna Ortega, you knew it was going to be, okay? Lionsgate is the one backing this movie. I feel like we could have got a lot more out of her inside of this film. All right, now enough on Jenna Ortega. I don't want to go in on her too heavy because, like I said, she is an amazing talent. So let's move on to my next negative with this film, and that would have to be the script. Guys, like I said, the concept of this movie is brilliant. The Weeknd experiencing heartbreak, being down on his luck, meeting a fan who is able to give him that sense of normality. It's a genius concept, but the execution of that concept was just not done very well inside of this film, guys. I gotta be honest. And when you watch this movie, when it begins with that concept, for instance, the first act, the second act of this film, I thought all was going well, but by the time you get to the third act of this movie, it's to the point where it's like, what the hell is going on here? There's a certain roadblock that this movie hits where it felt like they ran out of that creativity that birthed this movie in the first place, and they just had no idea where to go with this plot, where to end this movie, where to conclude at. And because of that, you get a sloppy ending that felt unfinished, it felt unrevised. And I think if they brought in stronger writers here and they looked over this script and they revised it a couple of times here, we would have actually had a very solid piece of cinema here. But because perhaps that was not done and this was not looked over as carefully as it should have been, this movie completely falls apart by the end, and I was left utterly disappointed with where this movie concludes. Now, there's also a nightmare sequence inside of this film, which was the promoted synopsis for this movie if you looked into it, and I gotta say, it felt out of place. It felt like it didn't belong here, and again, like they didn't have very much to do with it. So the story here just needed to be fleshed out a lot more. We needed a better written script here, and we would have gotten a much better project overall. Now, with all that being said, guys, those were my negatives for this film, and it's time that we move over into my overall review for Hurry Up Tomorrow. Look, guys, overall, if you're a fan of The Weeknd, you are going to get something out of this movie. The score, the soundtrack is amazing on another level, which you would know if you ever listen to anything inside of this guy's catalog. He is this big star for a reason. I thought Abel's performance was actually solid here. I thought he took a big step up from his performance on The Idol, and I thought he did have the strongest performance inside this entire movie, outside of maybe Barry Keoghan, who I forgot to mention, I forgot to talk about in the positive section of this movie. Barry Keoghan actually did really well inside of this film. He played The Weeknd's Irish manager, and I thought that was a very believable performance, and you believe these guys were close and had this history together, which I definitely liked seeing. Now, the visuals for this film are top notch. This film is extremely artistic in its vision. It's very creative. It pushes the boundaries here in multiple ways, with Abel playing himself in what is not a documentary, but a story involving him as a real person, which I thought was extremely interesting, especially considering it's not one of his life stories. So the movie is very unique in that aspect. However, Jenna Ortega's performance was not up to par with everything else she's ever done inside her entire career. It could have been a lot stronger here. The script could have been a lot better, a lot more well written, and a lot more revised here. And because of that, at times this movie comes across as a glorified music video that lasts an hour and 45 minutes, which, like I said, if you're a huge fan of The Weeknd like me, you're going to like for a lot of different reasons when you go to see this film. But if you're not a fan of The Weeknd, I can't recommend this film to you at all. In fact, I think you're going to be quite confused if you end up watching this movie for whatsoever reason. Now, with that being said, let's drop my official rating for Hurry Up Tomorrow. If I had to rate this film, guys, I would give this film a 7 out of 10. I give this film a 7 out of 10. I feel like that's a very fair rating, a very honest rating. Like I said, I do have a bias here. I'm a huge fan of The Weeknd, so me watching this movie, I'm gonna get a lot more out of this than most people are, unless they're also a big fan of Abel Tesfaye. Now, I hope this does well at the box office. I don't want to see this tank. I don't want to see them be like in a financial disaster here with Lionsgate. I hope this recoups this money. I hope they profit from this, and that we get to see Abel take another shot at it, take another role here in Hollywood, and give another performance for us, because I would like to see where his acting career goes in the future from here. I wouldn't mind seeing him in other projects in the future. I don't like this discourse online that he's just this terrible actor who is giving us bad performance after bad performance. I think it's very dishonest and untrue, especially if you've watched this film. He easily has the best performance here, competing with none other than Jenna Ortega and Barry Keoghan, two extremely strong actors inside of Hollywood. These are two of the best working today. Jenna Ortega Ortega, Barry Keoghan, the fact that Abel was able to keep up with them inside of this film in terms of acting prowess is astonishing, and he deserves to be commended for that. I love that he took this risk, love that he took this chance artistically. This is what we want to see out of our artists, guys. When we're talking best artists of this generation, The Weeknd is top 5 best artists of this generation, and the fact that he is pushing the envelope here and moving into cinema, moving into the film world, I can't help but say I'm proud of this guy, especially if you know his backstory and where he came from and how far he's came along this journey of his. Now, I do wish it was better. I do wish it was stronger. I wish we got more here. I wish this was something that I could rewatch throughout the year and recommend to other people to go out and see this. But like I said, if you're not a fan of The Weeknd, I cannot recommend this to you. If you are a fan of The Weeknd, go check this out at a matinee, guys, or even maybe a late night showing if you're like a super fan of this guy. Okay, now with that being said, those are my thoughts on the Hurry Up Tomorrow film. I gave an honest reaction, an honest breakdown, an honest review, so I hope you can appreciate that. And I'd love to know your thoughts on this film down in the comment section down below. If you don't know what I do here on Demigod ENT, I do film and TV reactions and reviews and other movie-based content. So if you're interested in this movie-based content, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.